and welcome to episode 74. I actually thought I'd done this one before, but I had an email in from a guy who wants to buy a microphone. He doesn't want the SM7B like we've got here. He wants to buy an EV mic. So he wants one of those enormous EVs. Now, we did a review a while back with the RE20 EV versus the SM7B. There's no point rehashing that. But his question was, the RE20 is a great mic. It's all over the place, but it's really, really expensive. I mean, at the moment, it's well over £500 here in the UK at the moment. And there's a baby brother, price-wise, the RE320, which is a black one as opposed to the sort of grey colour. But they look superficially the same. And he asked, is the RE320 a viable option if you haven't got the sort of 500 quid that you need to go and buy an RE20? And if you do buy it, what don't you get? So I figured that's what we'll look at today. So I've got here an RE20 and an RE320. So we'll have a look at the two together and see what's what. Now, there we go. First one out is the 320. So that's the RE320, and that's the black. And this one is the RE20. Now, interestingly enough, my RE20 is a bit unusual. And when I first bought it, I had to buy it from America. And when it arrived, it just looked a bit different from what I keep seeing all over the YouTube channels now. Because my one has definitely got a green tinge to it. And so I contacted EV and said, have I got a genuine EV mic here? They asked who I bought it from. They asked what the serial number was. So I read them all that off. And they came back and said, yeah, we did do a few mics that were not in the light grey colour. This has definitely got a slightly green tinge to it. And they just said, yeah, it's just one of those things. RE20s come in about 3 shades of grey. You've got the greeny shade. It's worth knowing about because if you buy a mic, you don't want to buy a dodgy one, do you? And if you got one that was a slightly different colour from the ones you see on YouTube, you might think something weird's going on. But rest assured, it's not. So what have we got? 2 mics. Now, very obviously, they share a common housing, but they're not the same. The internal construction of the 320 versus the RE20 is completely different, and you can even see the EV details on that online. So, you know, they are not the same microphone. Clearly, they share common features. The way that the stand mount fits on the bottom, same on both of them. They're similar weights. I don't know the exact weight. But the only other real difference is just the way the switches work. Now, I don't know if you can see that. Both the microphones have got switches at the bottom. But the way they both work is completely different. So on the RE20, essentially the switch lets you roll off the very bottom. So if you don't want it to be sort of boomy at the bottom, or maybe you've got some rumbles coming through the mic stand, maybe there's even perhaps some low frequency noise from your aircon and things like that, the thing will let you filter off that very bottom without losing the sort of, you know, the warm characteristic sound that they've got. The 320's a bit different. The switch on the 320, instead of rolling off, the switch on the bottom of this one allows it to operate as a drum microphone, which is a little bit strange, but it does change the frequency response curve a little bit by adding in something at the very bottom, and there's a little tiny dip just above it. So this thing on a kick drum can actually sound quite good. The two settings, the conventional mic setting and then this special drum setting, sort of give you a vaguely AKG 112 sort of brighter, cleaner, clickier sound. I don't normally use them on kick drums, but this one is definitely a dual function. As a result of that tweaking and the slightly different capsule, it goes down a bit lower too. I mean, we're not talking huge amounts, but there's about an extra 10 hertz on the very bottom where there is some useful response because it's been designed that way. Both of these mics feature EV's quite unique system of acoustic tubes inside, so that the distance you use them at has very little impact on the sound. So proximity effect wise, there is a tiny little bit, but it's not particularly pronounced on either. So they can both be used quite happily for vocals. They do pop a bit if you get too close to them, so you have to still be a bit careful. But realistically, the RE20 and the 320 are sort of brothers, really. It's not an age thing, they're just brothers. Similar designs, doing similar things, but they do sound a bit different. Okay, so now we can do the test. You're listening to me at the moment on the SM7B. So let's switch across now to the one next door to it, which is the RE320. So the RE320, when you've actually put them out, does tend to blend away. One of the cameras that I'm looking at on the screen here, we've got black mic, and then of course this grey one. So the grey one does stand out. So if you're doing this thing for YouTube, then you are going to see them. The grey is a contrast against the black desk, the black keyboard, the black background, black everything in here. If you look at me on the other camera, the RE20 is a very obvious microphone, isn't it? I mean, it stands out like mad against the black background. The 320 next door, well, it's a bit more discreet. Same thing with the SM7B. Now, while we've been chatting about this, we've been switching between them. And while there is a difference, it's a small one. Now, is that difference worth over £200? I mean, we're talking about a £300 microphone, comparing it with a £500 microphone. I don't know. I think the RE20 sounds fine, but I think the 320 is a good mic too. So I'm going to totally sit on the fence here. I've got no opinion on this one whatsoever. And I'm quite happy using either of these. A 320 or an RE20 works fine for me. I've got no bother with them at all. And I could easily swap the SM7B for one of them. I don't think it will be a problem. It's a quiet day in the studio today because I've got the Blackmagic recorder switched off and I'm recording on everything separately. It's a bit of a silly thing to do because when you do it like that, you use up tons and tons and tons of disk space. But it can't be helped, so let's not worry about it too much. But hopefully, while I've been rambling on, you've had a good chance to listen to the microphones. One thing that's worth doing while we're doing the comparison between these two mics is I'll switch in the extra positions. So on the RE20, I'm going to switch in the filter that removes the bottom. So that's on the RE20. So the RE20 has now got no bottom. And on the 320, I'll switch it across to the other pattern and let you have a listen to that. So on the RE20, we've got the bottom filtered off. And on the RE320, we're now in drum mode, which is a bass boost at the very bottom. The slope sort of goes down, and it's got a little tiny notch. The 320 is also a little bit pronounced at the top end of its frequency response. Both these microphones say they go up to 18k. I can't hear 18k, so I've got no way of actually telling that for myself. But that's what the spec says. The spec says that both of these go right up to 18k, and I've no reason to doubt that. But with the 320, from about 1200 hertz, there's a little bit of extra business going on. So it should give you maybe a touch of extra sort of clarity at the very top. But I think that's a bit subjective because I certainly can't hear it at all. And, my hearing now goes up to about 14.5 maybe, and then starts to fade away. But 14.5 is very high. Those with golden ears that can hear up to 20k, I can only sort of be a bit envious. I can't, it's gone now. But 18k, again, outside my spec. So this is what the two mics sound like when they've actually got their filters engaged. Bit of extra bass and a bit more warmth on the 320. And the bottom on the EV20 just rolled off. So we're a hand span away from the mics, distance-wise, which for me is close. And when I don't do close. But this is sufficient, I think. So you've now got all the mics. I'll switch back to the SM7B and finish up on that one. So we're back now to our normal SM7B. And there we are. 3 mics. What do you think? Is it worth the extra £200? I'm not sure. If you're short of cash, I think the 320 would be a perfectly decent mic. I bought the 320 first. The RE20 was a later purchase. I don't think that spending too much money on a first microphone is particularly useful because you've got nothing really to judge it against. That's the snag, isn't it? You know, buy the mic, even if it's an expensive one, you've got nothing to compare it with. The 320 for me came first, followed by the RE20, and I think that's probably why I'm not that excited about it, because I had pretty good to start with, and then the RE20 was not a sort of wow microphone, which I think I expected it to be. I did the same thing with the U87. After sort of loving my AKG 414s, I bought a U87 expecting this sort of magicness that they're well known for, and it sort of just didn't come. So I think jumping into a really good mic, a really high price ticket too early is not necessarily a good idea. And judging by the difference between these two, it is a very small one. There we go. RE20 versus the RE320. Both nice mics. What do you think? Leave me some comments below. Tell me if you think the RE20 is substantially better. I predict not many of you will. Take care. See you on the next video. Look after yourselves.